All right. Well, good afternoon. I'm
Hello.
excited to be here. Hello, hello. I'm excited to be here and present with you all and share some things about accessibility and what I know. Thank you for having me, Women Tech Makers Montreal. This will be a great experience. I am very eager to begin kind of dissecting what accessibility is and what it looks like for women tech makers, especially all throughout the country. I'm currently in the United States, but I had the pleasure of watching Justin Trudeau today talk a little bit about the COVID-19 and how it is affecting the Canadian citizens. It is very unfortunate that I can't be there with you all in person and that we are kind of facing this global crisis. But rest assured, I will still be able to provide you all with some thrifty, insightful information. And you'll walk away from this knowing a little bit more about accessibility. And I hope to empower you to investigate a little bit more. So again, thank you for having me, Women Tech Makers Montreal. Let's get started. All right. So who am I? And what makes me qualified to be able to present this information to you all? Um, where did I start? What do I do in tech? Those are all questions you may wonder. So let me go ahead and debunk a few things. So my name is Jeannette Washington. I started my career as a speech pathologist or a speech therapist, some may call. So I worked with individuals who had issues with stuttering, who had speech delays, disfluencies, and articulation and language disorders. So, with that in mind, I came into the technology industry in 2017 with a toolkit full of information about people with disabilities and people who had different abilities and what that looks like. So, when I decided to transition into tech, I looked into assistive communication technology and natural language processing. How could I be an asset to those industries? That was like my probing question, my essential question for myself. So I worked as a software engineer and I was able to really crack the code with a couple companies I worked with before I branched out and created my own company, Barely Articulating. Barely Articulating is a think tank where I go and provide resources for different companies that want to create a more diverse or inclusive setting for those with ADHD, dyslexia, autism, and just to name a few different abilities. I recently wrote the book, Technical Difficulties Why Dyslexic Narratives Matter in Tech. And I created this book because I felt as if it was needed in the tech industry. A lot of techies are thriving, women and men, but a lot of them, from the research I've done, about 70% don't tell their employer about the disabilities or the different abilities that they possess because they're a little fearful that maybe they'll get fired or that they won't get that upcoming promotion because that will kind of make them seem as though they're not capable. So this book I wrote, Technical Difficulties: Why Dyslexic Narratives Matter in Tech, kind of solved that by divulging information about what it looks like to work in tech and have these different abilities and what you can do so that your employer can be on board with your particular circumstances. So I know that I've been able to hop into our Slack channel and give you all a little bit of information about the slides. So I have that here, bit.ly/WTMA11Y is how you'll be able to access those slides. It's a shortened bit.ly link, but it is also very case sensitive. So make sure that the W, T, and the M are capitalized as well as the A, and then a 1 and then the Y is lowercase. If you want to tweet about this talk and tell people what you've learned, and if you want to follow me, or if you would like to follow the Women Tech Makers Montreal, I have that information here on this particular slide. So you can kind of dive in and tweet some questions. I know we'll have some moderation going on And with that in mind, your questions may be able to be seen, and you'll be able to ask me before I head on off. All right. So, what are our expectations today? I think it's very important now that you know a little bit about me, you know how to reach me, and you know a little bit about my accomplishments. I want to talk about what the expectations are today. What can you expect to learn, or what can you expect from the presentation today? So, one, we're going to discuss common, special, or different abilities. Okay. We're going to develop a new understanding of workplace diversity. And three, I want to empower you all to do a little bit more investigation about accessibility. You can gain as much as insight as you like from me, but it will be really helpful if afterwards you decided to go ahead and find out more, research more, kind of look deeper into what accessibility is and how it even matters for you. So let's get started. Always like to start talking about accessibility by showing this picture depicted here. I actually don't know the author or the illustrator, rather, of this illustration. When I researched it, I found that it had been kind of viral and nobody actually knew who created this first image. However, it's very important that you kind of take all of this in. It says, for a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree. So as you see, um, there's a goldfish, there's a seal, a wolf, a penguin, a monkey, a bird, and an elephant. Everyone is not going to be able to climb that tree. You know, maybe one or two. The bird possibly won't even be able to climb it. It'll get to the top of the tree seamlessly, but it won't be able to climb it. I think the only participant in this particular selection would be the monkey who can physically climb the tree. So it's important to remember this. A lot of times in tech, as women, as people with special abilities, they are expected to do things that are beyond our wheelhouse, that is beyond what we can actually physically or intellectually complete. We can't complete these particular tasks. So it's important to see that this kind of will help us understand equity on a whole entire different base moving forward. So when we think about special abilities, it's important that we consider learning, visual, hearing, mobility, neurodiversity, and mental health. For instance, learning, we can consider dyslexia as a special ability. And ask yourself, how can someone with dyslexia thrive at your workplace? Visually, we can think about someone who is colorblind. How can someone who is colorblind thrive in the workplace? And how can they also be able to experience the web like someone who isn't colorblind? These are questions you want to start developing as you look at all of the different abilities or disabilities that we have here. Hearing, someone who is hard at hearing, how will they be able to really appreciate a presentation that is given if they're not able to make out every single word, or if they can't lip read? They cannot lip read. That may be another burden for them. What about mobility? Someone with cerebral palsy or dystrophy. How can muscle dystrophy, how can they really appreciate things at the workplace? Are they able to get into their cubicle without any hitches? Are they able to get into the work site without any difficulties? You want to start really thinking about all people on the spectrum and not just gender, like men and women. That is more surface based. But you definitely won't be able to look at a person and tell, oh, that person has a neurodiversity issue or they're neurodiverse. For instance, we have autism, ADD, ADHD, and seizures. You can't just look at a colleague or look at a potential employee and know that they have these things. Finally, mental health. And again, this is not an exhaustive list. I didn't say that to begin with, but let me definitely preface that. This is not an exhaustive list. These are just a couple different things within those scopes: learning, visual, hearing, mobility, neurodiversity, and mental health. I know a lot of us are experiencing some anxiety now that we have the COVID-19 on the cusp right here in front of us. I know that I've just read a lot of Canadian citizens are stranded in other countries. They're wanting to come back, but it's a it's balancing act now. So again, mental health issues, how are we addressing that in the workplace? How are we addressing that when we're posting online for our company? How are we addressing that as we create our web pages? Are we being sensitive? Are we being agitators? These are some things you want to definitely start to question yourself about as it relates to the scope of the differences that exist. What would happen if we all began to view ability as a form of diversity rather than deficiency? So, what would happen if we started creating websites or social media platforms or environments that were conducive to diversity, that included mobility or that included mental health or neurodiversity? What would that look like? Start really asking yourself that question, because it's really important for leaders and those who have a leader's ear. If you are right next to the leader, you're the superior. It's important that you are bringing this to the surface so that others can see that, hey, they're being heard. Not only are they being heard, but there is some empathy there. Empathy can go a long way. All right, so at work, what are some practices we can start developing or nurturing as in tech or even men in tech? What are some things that we need to start to see in the workplace? So, hiring and interviewing should showcase the use of creative challenges and performance based tasks. So, this really means when we're hiring, we're not doing a one sided hiring process. We're also looking at the fact that some people may become anxious at the thought of potentially interviewing with a new company. So, how can we make our future employees less anxious? We can use some creative challenges and we can offer performance based tasks. Next, document objective skills and experience over personality quirks. So, instead of just thinking to yourself, well, I don't like the way this person is. Hello? Yes. Okay. So, we want to make sure we consider that documenting objective skills and experience over personality quirks is very important. So, someone who has autism may have awkward social functions. Okay. They may look off into space or they may have a difficult time giving you eye contact. So, with that in mind, let's keep focused on the objective skills and experience and not so much on that person's personality quirks. Next, assignments should involve collaborative teams that mix people creatively. So teammates can garner value from diverse navigation and perspective. I think it's very important that when we are creating these groups for or teams rather, when we are developing a product or when we have a deliverable that needs to go out, we need to consider the fact that mixing that team up can be beneficial for everyone, even our clients. A few other things I'd like you all to keep in mind in the tech workforce is trainings must be well designed to benefit the diversity of thought and to address social skills and emotional IQ. Um, who likes to go to a sit and get? Not me. When I go to trainings and professional development sessions, workshops, I like to be able to get up and move a little bit. I like to be able to express myself through asking questions. I like being able to make things or use my hands. And that is so important when we're creating these trainings. They should be multi sensory. Okay. Next, revamp performance reviews, or company-wide procedures and policies. Okay, this kind of goes without, but it's very important as we are going through performance reviews to consider things about our employees, whether they have mental health issues, whether they have intellectual or physical issues that they're facing. That's really important as it all relates to their performance. Next, provide a clear avenue to request accommodations or workplace adjustments during the hiring process, during onboarding, or before the first day on the job. So let's not wait until that particular employee, or if you are the person with the disability, let's not wait until the employer offers some type of accommodation or modification. Let's use our voice to make sure that we're heard and that our voice is not missing. Let's ask for the things that we need. All right, so now we're going to take a different route. We're going to go down this winding path real quick. So I hope you all were taking good notes, but if not, we're going to talk a little bit more about what accessibility actually means. All right, so as you'll see with my link I created, the bit.ly link had A11Y. A11Y is a number nymph, okay? So it is basically the shortened form of the longer word accessibility. Right? Accessibility is how people perceive, understand, navigate, interact with, and contribute to the web. So now we're going from the workplace to the websites, or the web, the interwebs, as I've heard people fondly call it. So who can really benefit from the contributions, the navigations, the perceptions from the web? Let's talk a little bit more about how high contrast text or pictures or background, who they can assist. So, high contrast text can assist someone with a permanent disability like vision loss, someone with a temporary disability like someone who has cataracts, or someone who has a situational disability like snow blindness. We live in the colder states and colder part. I know Canada gets pretty cold, so I know you can empathize with snow blindness. I've had moments where I look outside and I'm like, whoa, and I almost see stars. So it's very important that we create we create platforms online that benefit those with permanent, temporary, and situational needs. What about large tap areas? Who does that benefit? Well, it could benefit someone with Parkinson's disease, it can benefit someone with a broken hand, and it could also benefit someone who is drunken, someone who may have had a very long, tipsy night. Large tap areas can benefit permanent, temporary, and situational instances. Next, we have closed captioning. Who benefits from that? Well, someone with hearing loss, someone with maybe an ear infection, or if you have children, like a lot of us are working at home, it's very essential that you have that closed caption so you can kind of multitask. You can tell your child to sit down, have a seat, finish your work, but you can also see the text and be able to kind of read along with that video. All right. So with programmers who have these different abilities, or as people call disabilities, those who are neurodiverse, they need internet filters. Internet filters will help you stay anchored on a task because you won't have pop-ups happening. Same thing with page simplifiers. It'll help you focus all of your time. And this could be the breaking point for someone with ADHD, which is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Also, syntax checkers can be masterful for someone with maybe dyslexia or someone who has language based learning disorders. Syntax checkers like Grammarly can kind of help you make sure your grammar and your syntax line up. All right, so our next steps. I know I gave you all a ton of information and you're probably still taking note or you have a lot of questions, which is always good. I think that I am an expert in this. I've had my 10,000 hours of studying accessibility. However, I know that I don't know everything. There are still things that I can learn from you. There's still things that I can learn from anyone. I think one of my favorite scientists, Bill Nye the Science Guy, stated once that there's something you can learn from everyone you meet. So I'm eager to hear your questions. I'm excited to assist in any capacity I can. But let's talk about next steps. So our next step is to show up and take up space. Okay. It's important that you are here, that you are ready to learn more about accessibility, and that you know that this can go beyond the buzzword. Take up space. That simply means show up. That's another way of saying show up. To take up space, you're here. You're ready to learn. You're ready to take this information to the next level. Next, learn what works best for you. Trial and error. So if you are someone with some different abilities, some special abilities, or some disabilities, it's important that you learn what works best for you so that you can convey that information to your employer, or so that you can be the one to convey that information to other people who may have similar disabilities. Hey, this works for me, so you should try this. Okay. And that kind of leads into the next one where it says, be the change that you want to see. Advocate, advocate, advocate. We want to make sure that if we are having some issues as women, we're bringing it to the forefront. Okay. We're letting people know what our issues are, and we're being advocates in that nature. All right. Finally, I'm going to bring you all back to my social handle. Again, we have WTM_Montreal. If you want to tweet some information in about my talk, what you like, what you'd like to see next time. I'm barely artistic, and be sure to use those hashtags. If you want to view the slides, I do have them here again for you to jot down. It's bit.ly, capital W, capital T, capital M, capital A, 11Y. All right, and that's it for me. I hope that I was able to help you all understand why accessibility is important, and tell you a little bit about a couple different disabilities or special abilities or different abilities that exist, and that you are now looking forward to kind of probing through some more information and some research so that you can be able to be an advocate for those who have these different abilities. Thank you.
Awesome.
Are there any questions?
Thank you very much, Jeannette. This was a very, very interesting talk. A sometimes delicate subject, but a much needed information for sure. Right now we're going to start with the questions.
Okay.
Our questions for the speaker. So for everyone watching on YouTube, if you have questions, you can ask them on the channel. If you have already joined the Slack channel, ask your questions on the talk section. You can also use the YouTube chat if you're not part of the Women Tech Makers 2020 Slack. I'll start with the first question.
Mm-hmm. I'm happy to hear it.
So I like the entire approach of not waiting for the employer or the recruiter to make their space accessible. Actually, how about teammates? How do you bring the information and the subjects with teammates, and also especially when you have invisible, not handicaps, but invisible issues?
Okay. Excellent question. So I do believe that a lot of us have these invisible different abilities that we possess, and a lot of times it is difficult to address them and to bring them to the forefront because we don't want people to think less of us. and we don't want to compromise any relationships by bringing this to a head. But I think this conversation needs to be had. It is up to you to see how comfortable you are with whether you'd like to pull one person to the side, tell them, and then pull another person to the side and tell them, or whether you'd like to just carve out some space and say, hey, I'd like to kind of tell you all about something that, I experienced, and I want to be transparent with you all because I thoroughly enjoy our working relationship, and I don't want anything on my end to compromise our work or to make you all think different of me. Another way is to bring some research to them, like, for instance, if you possess invisible disability like dyslexia, maybe it'd be helpful to have like a little pamphlet or a little website link that you can say, hey, check this out, and then I want to kind of have this conversation with you all afterwards. So there's a couple different ways to address your team about this. I would highly suggest that you are not ashamed of who you are and go into it just being transparent and being authentic, because at the end of the day, people value honesty above any other trait that exists. So if you go to them and you're honest and you're saying, hey, talk to them about your vulnerabilities, you can pull someone one-to-one, or you can pull someone to the side, or you can pull the group to the side and let them know. So it's a couple different ways you can do that, but just be confident in who you are and know that however it comes across, you're being authentic.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Another question is about disability and open space. So one of our participants asks how to, well, especially when people in tech have begun to encourage talking and collaborating in open spaces in the office, they understand that communication is important, but it's also important to have people who don't necessarily fit in this stereotype of hiding in a dark corner coding. The question is if there is a merit to the argument that not everyone benefits from talking about the problem all the time, since not everyone is extroverted.
Well, yeah, I don't think that talking about the problem all the time is beneficial. I think that it should be addressed once and then move forward. You say your piece. As it relates to introvert and extrovert, I truly believe that, talking about the fact that you are overstimulated is important. Mm-hmm. I think that employers and employees can understand that now more than ever, since a lot of us are social distancing and isolating ourselves from one another. I think it's important that we are being frank with people about being stimulated too much by all of the different collaborative efforts. And I have certainly been in that instance before where I worked at a position and they wanted to meet with me every single day. And they wanted to talk to me about, about just various things, but it was becoming overwhelming to me. And so I've had to have that conversation where I say, hey, can we do this maybe once a week and not every day? Because, this is taking away from me. This is really zapping a lot of my energy because now I have to be sensitive to all of these different people, energies, auras, vibes. It was a lot for me. So I think that letting someone in management or a superior know that, there's a lot of overstimulation and that you're definitely not here for it overall. And then another way is to look at possibly having meetings that are not all face to face. Like, can we do a Google Doc that's live and we all comment on different things? Can we, because nowadays there's so many ways to communicate where you don't necessarily have to come to the mingler or the networking event or the meeting. Like, we can Slack about it. Mm-hmm. So just knowing that there are different platforms to use and being frank about overstimulation.
Absolutely. Maybe we have time for one last question.
Okay.
is what methods and what criteria do you use when you're faced with waiting an accessibility fix that might cancel out the benefit for one user group versus making an improvement for another group?
I always feel like when you assist one group, then it's impossible to be of detriment to another. So that one is a little tricky. Definitely don't want to axe out any particular group. With that, I think I may go back to the drawing board. I may get some other people to participate so that they can provide me with some value and some insight, and really try to make sure that everyone's needs are partially met. I know a lot of times we can't meet every single criteria, but I do think that with more voices involved, then there are ways where more people can benefit from a project.
All right. Perfect. Thank you very much.